everyone, I have a requested video for you today, which is to do a video on mixed media basics. Now I just want to start off by saying I am by no means claiming to be a total mixed media expert. As I said, this is a requested video, but I do understand how a lot of mixed media things can sound a bit overwhelming at first, because it's all like gels, pastes and stuff, and you're like, oh, what do you use that for? What do you use that for? And when I started too, I had the same but I promise you it is not at all. Once you get an idea of the basic tools and mediums and stuff, you can really get going on mixed media. So I have made a list of 11 basic mixed media tools and supplies, and I will briefly go over how to use them and what they are for and all that kind of thing. Admittedly, it's more like 14 things, but the last two categories are kind of miscellaneous ones, so I've just lumped them in together. Now I won't be covering every single thing you can use in mixed media, because that would just be a whole series of hour-long videos. I'm just going to go over, as I said, the absolute basics, and I won't also go over everything you can possibly do with all these things, because again, that would take ages, so it's quite possible that I'm going to miss out your favourite mixed media thing that you like to use, but as I said, we are going over the basics. Number one on my list is Gesso. If there is one thing that I insist that you get, is Gesso. Now originally Gesso actually meant a slightly different thing. It was a kind of primer, as this Gesso is, but it was slightly different, something that was used way back when. But when people say Gesso now, they almost inevitably mean acrylic gesso. So acrylic gesso, its basic purpose is as a primer. You spread it or paint it or layer it over your surface that you're going to be working on, and once it is dry, it creates a non-porous surface. So anything else that you're going to be putting on top of your project, be it inks and sprays and paints or whatever, they are not going to seep through. They will just stay on top of the gesso. I have some people ask, can you just use white acrylic paint rather than gesso? Yes and no, but gesso is better, really. Gesso is thicker, it has a certain grittiness to it that helps stuff cling to it, and yes, it's just, you can use white acrylic to prime things if you really want to, and for the most part it's going to do the job, but if you're doing heavy mixed media, definitely use gesso. There are also different types of gesso, but the one I absolutely suggest you start with is just the normal white acrylic gesso. It's the one that I definitely use the most. As you see, this one is the Rowney one. You can pick it up on Amazon for about £4 or £5. I will leave links, by the way, to everything down in the description box. I will only link things that I use personally, because I don't want to be recommending anything to you that I haven't tried out. So all the links will be stuff that only I have used. So other kinds of gesso you can get, all acrylic, are clear gesso, heavy gesso, and also black gesso. Now I don't have any black gesso because there's only been one occasion so far where I've thought, oh, some black gesso would be handy here, but I feel like that's not enough times to warrant buying a pot of it. But yes, after you've got some white gesso and played around with it and got used to it and stuff, the next I would suggest is clear gesso. Clear gesso is really handy if you are priming something like a scrapbook paper or any other kind of paper where you want to keep the pattern or the colour or whatever, because obviously if you put white gesso over it, it's just going to turn white. So yes, clear gesso is good for making your surface nice and primed and sturdy and stuff, or putting mixed media on, but it dries completely clear, so you'll be able to see whatever is behind it. It does, however, dry completely matte, so if, for example, you were priming a glossy paper, then don't use the clear gesso because you're going to lose that glossiness. Heavy gesso, as it implies, is heavier than normal white gesso. It's really, really thick consistency. I've mostly used this for more altered objects where I want it to be super, super sturdy kind of thing. It is really, 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 really thick, sort of thick Greek yogurt kind of consistency, but don't eat it. Now gesso has many, many other uses other than just for priming, but I'm not going to go over all of them because, you know, it will take forever, but you can mix pigments in with gesso, so paints and inks and stuff to make it coloured. You can use it for adding texture and things. It has loads of uses. One of my favourite things to do with just normal gesso is to water it down a ton and then use it for splatters, because I love a good gesso splatter. White gesso splatters look good on almost any project. You may have noticed as well that these are a different brand than my other gesso. These are the Prima Art Basics by Finnabair, and yes, they are sort of the more high-end ones. They are not very cheap. These retail for about £10 or more a pot, depending on where you purchase them from, but they are super amazing quality and they do last like forever. Number two is gel mediums and other kinds of adhesives. So gel mediums, I have here gloss gel and matte gel. The difference between the two is pretty obvious. They both dry translucent, but one dries glossy and one dries matte. Now I mostly use these for adhesive purposes. They kind of have the ability to stick anything to anything. So if you're putting on metal embellishments, cloth ones, paper ones, whatever it is, they will stick anything to anything. And they're also super handy for mixing in things like art stones, glass glitter, micro beads, all those little things that you're kind of like, what in the heck do I do with this? Use some gel medium. Again, these are the Prima Art Basics ones. You can get slightly cheaper ones, such as this Deco Art one. This one, just as an FYI, does smell very strongly. It's quite a chemical woo smell, but yes, many different brands of gel medium. I would start with a gloss. I definitely use the gloss more than anything, but the matte is pretty good too. They can, however, be used as more than an adhesive. Like Gesso, you can mix in pigments to create heavy body paint or something like that. You can put them through stencils for texture. They have lots and lots of uses. It's just that I just happen to use them mostly for adhesive purposes, but as I said, lots and lots of different uses. Other common adhesives in the mixed media world are the Ranger Glossy accents. Now, you will notice these are Crackle accents, and the reason being I'm holding these up is because I don't have any glossy accents anymore. I finished my last bottle, and for the most part, because I use the gel medium so much, I find I don't need it at the moment. I might buy some more eventually, who knows. But it is a hell of a good glue and is very, very sticky, and almost like the gel will stick anything to anything. I just think the gel is a little bit better. The Crackle accents, by the way, just in case you're wondering, if you put a layer of this over something, then it will get a transparent crackle effect over it. So it's pretty cool if you put it over like a photo or something. It makes it look all old and cool. Anyways, so just, that was a side note, but in case you're wondering what that does. If you watch a lot of mixed media process videos and stuff on YouTube, you will see a lot of mixed media artists use glue gun, which I do not personally use for mixed media, and my reasons are twofold. One, not all hot glue is archival safe, so that is something to keep in mind. I think the majority of hot glue sticks are not, and you've got to look harder to find archival safe ones. Because this is just a little cheap one from Hobbycraft, and it just comes, you use the little cheap Hobbycraft glue sticks with it, I'm going to assume they're not archival safe. So that's one of the reasons I don't use it. But the other reason is sometimes with hot glue, once it's dry, it doesn't last forever kind of thing, especially if it's a non-porous surface. So say I stuck a metal embellishment onto something like a plasticky surface, eventually it's just going to pop off because there's nothing for the glue to just cling to, kind of thing. And so yes, if you want your projects to last a long time, I personally wouldn't use the hot glue gun, but that's just my personal taste. It is an option, it's up to you. Number 3 is paste. Now with pastes, there are so many different types. I'm going to say this for every number really, there's so many different choices, so I'm just going to go over the really, really basic ones. The first paste I suggest you get is a decent modelling paste. This is by, I never know how to say this brand. Pebeo, I don't know. This is a high density modelling paste, and I mostly use it for stenciling. I do have a slightly thinner one, which comes in a thing like this. I prefer the high density, but this one's fine too. Again, these are from Amazon, relatively cheap. And just like the Gesso and the gel mediums and all that kind of thing, you can add colour to it to make it coloured with inks or whatever, or you can put colour over the top of it, you can leave it white. Again, there's so many options and different things to do, but modelling paste is definitely the first kind of paste I suggest you get. Of course, all the different mixed media brands, Prima, Ranger, all that kind of thing, they all have their own paste. Ranger, I think, call it texture paste, but the normal Ranger texture paste is kind of exactly the same kind of thing. It adds texture and layers and dimension and all that kind of thing. Another kind of paste is Crackle paste, and this kind of does the same kind of thing as these Crackle accents in that you get a crackly effect once it is dry. This is the opaque Crackle, so obviously it does not dry clear. You can get transparent texture paste as well, Crackle paste as well. There is a difference between these kind of things. There is I'm not going to say argument, that's too strong a word, but a lot of people will say do not dry Crackle paste with a heat tool because it doesn't crackle as well. Now I have actually found with the Ranger that it crackles better when you use a heat tool, so maybe it's the Prima that you need to leave to air dry overnight or something for it to crackle better. I don't know, but personally that's what I found with this particular paste anyways. You can get so many zillions of other kinds of paste. There's like glass bead paste, shimmery paste, embellishment mousse. Prima do a light paste that's kind of bubbly and airy. There's just So many different types. As I said, the modelling paste is definitely the one I recommend you start with, and they have so many functions to use through stenciling or just to add texture and layers and dimension. But yes, all of the types, but start with the modelling. Number 4 is tools. So basically the things that you use to apply stuff to other stuff. So applying your gel mediums or pastes or inks or paints or whatever, you're going to need some tools to do it. The first thing I suggest you buy are some very cheap and wide brushes. The reason I suggest you buy cheaper ones is because basically with all that thick stuff going in them, like gesso and that, they're never going to be properly nicely clean and stuff, and sometimes you can't really be bothered to clean them properly. Not that I would ever do that, but yes, I got this set of 3 super wide ones for about £2.50 from the range, and the super wide ones are more helpful for spreading gesso on and doing your priming and that kind of thing, but other uses too. Then you're going to want some sort of palette knife kind of thing. Now I have seen a lot of people use, and I don't do it just because I prefer not to, just old gift cards and that kind of thing, and I did get one out to show you, to give you a visual aid, but I don't know what I've done with it. Where is it? Okay, genuinely have lost it, but you know what I mean. You can use an old gift card or something to like scrape paste and stuff through stencils, or just scrape it onto your surface or whatever, but I just prefer to use these. They're easier to handle, you've got the different sizes and stuff. I got a pack of more than these, I just don't know where all of them are right now, for less than £2 in the range, and I'm sure you can get them in many other places too. So I would just, it's just worth getting these things, and you've got all the different sizes and stuff. And I'll use these, as I said, will apply gesso with it if I want a very thick layer of gesso. I will do stenciling through these, I will apply texture paste with these. I use like the smaller ones to apply gel medium to little objects for adhesive purposes, you know, just so many uses. I also find it incredibly helpful to have a bag of these lying around, and these are just very cheap makeup sponges from Poundland, different like sizes and textures and stuff, but these are just really helpful to apply paints and stuff. You want a little light dabbing of gesso, whatever you want, just £1 for a bag of like 30. Can't really go wrong with that. I also just found this wooden spoon that I occasionally use to apply things to other things. Just pick up stuff like this from all over the place. Everything can be helpful in mixed media. After you've got yourself your cheap brushes and palette knives and all that kind of thing, then you want to start looking at your nice brushes. First, I would get an aqua brush or a water brush for watercolouring. If you haven't seen one of these before, then, well, firstly, where have you been? Secondly, this is good for watercolouring, basically. It is a brush that has a barrel in it that you fill with water, and you can watercolour away like that. Please though, please just use it for watercolours. I saw someone use acrylics with these the other day, and I was like, that hurts me deep inside. Then, as I said, you want to get your slightly nicer brushes. You can usually get packs of 5, 10, 15, whatever, for fairly decent prices. You don't have to jump straight into the super fancy ones. Like this one cost me quite a lot of money. It's a Winsor & Newton one, which I bought ages and ages ago for painting. But yes, different sizes and stuff do different things. Fan brushes, angled brushes, wider brushes. There's this one which is called like a stipple one, I think. You can see it's got like the little pokey up bits there, or a teeny weeny tiny little brush for doing little detailed things. But yes, pack of brushes you can pick up relatively cheaply, but only if you really wanted to do a lot of stuff with paints and watercolours and that. If you want to stick to just stenciling and inks, sprays and stuff, then you don't really need these, and just stick with cheap brushes and whatnot. Number 5 is a water spritzer, which is useful for more than just watercolour. Admittedly, that's what the majority of what I use it for is, but most things that you're going to use in mixed media are going to be water-based products. The reason I have 2 spray bottles, well, one is because I saw this in IKEA and I really liked the colour of it, but also they have different kinds of sprays. This one's like a really directional spray, and this one has the option to do like a very misty spray. I think this one is intended for gardening, indoor plant kind of things, and this is a hairdressing one. You can get water spritzers that are designed specifically for mixed media and art and stuff, but I don't really think they're necessary. I think it's just a brand thing, so I would just pick up a cheap one like from somewhere that does like the hairdressing stuff, or like a garden centre. I also used to use one of those little travel spray bottles that you can pick up in like Superdrug and places like that. And I've also seen people just repurpose old spray bottles that have had some sort of beauty product in or something like that, just repurpose those, which, you know, that works perfectly fine as well. Just make sure you give it a good wash out first, because you don't want to be like spraying your artwork with some bleach, I don't know. Number 6 is a heat tool or heat gun. The reason for this is basically when you're doing mixed media, a lot of your mediums are going to be wet or moist, and you're going to want to dry them, especially between layers, so that the layers don't all mix into each other and create mud. So yes, you're going to want to dry between layers, unless you are the most patient person in the world and you're willing to wait hours and hours and hours between your layers, then get yourself a heat gun. I will just say that this particular heat tool slash gun I have is an embossing heat tool, so it's created with the purpose of doing heat embossing, so it's not ideal for mixed media. However, it kind of works fine for it, really. The difference is if you buy a heat tool or heat gun that is for mixed media, it is more of a, it's not as hot and it's more blowy. That's the best word I can think of for that. Whereas this is a very strong directional heat and it gets really, really hot, because it's meant to melt embossing powder, really. So the only thing you need to do is keep it moving. If you're drying mixed media work, just keep it moving like that, because if you keep it in the same spot for too long, it's going to start melting things and making things bubble and kind of ruining it, basically. So yes, you can use, if you've got like a little travel hairdryer or something, that will work completely fine too. But yes, a lot of you, I imagine, will have these lying around. So yes, as I said, they work fine, just keep moving. Number 7 is stencils, and I personally would not want to do mixed media without stencils, because they can create some seriously stunning effects, especially when you're using a thick modelling paste or texture paste and stuff. It just adds so much texture and dimension and prettiness and all that kind of thing. So yes, stencils. You get them in all shapes and sizes and all kinds of things. I've got some 12x12s over there, I've got some A4 ones. I keep my small ones, my 6x6s and 5x5s, in this little plastic display wallet like this. Now, I'm not going to recommend any particular brand or type or whatever, because I've got so many different ones, but there are differences in quality, I will say. So for example, this one I've got at the front here, this is, I can't remember if it's Ranger or a very similar brand, but this is a really, really good stencil. Whereas sometimes some of the cheaper ones, let me find an example, such as this one that I got from the Works, you can see the pattern there. It's really, really thin plastic, and when you scrape over it, sometimes all these little detail bits kind of fling back at you, so you can't use these too many times. But they're fine because they're cheap. AliExpress stencils are a bit of a lottery, bit of a gamble. I've got some stencils from AliExpress which are amazing, and I couldn't tell the difference between whether they were, you know, Ranger, Prima or AliExpress, because they're so good. But I've also got some from AliExpress which are shocking. So bit of a gamble, and they've been from the same shops as well, so you just can't really know until you buy them, to be honest. So this is one of my favourite stencils. This was actually a little AliExpress purchase, and it's a great stencil and cost me about 99p. But yes, what you do with stencils is, well, many things. As I said, you can use your palette knife to scrape texture paste or gel medium or something over the top of it. You can either colour the medium before it goes on or colour it over the top of it, up to you. You can also use ink such as Distress and dab over to stencil the colour in. You can spray over the stencils. There are a bajillion things you can do with stencils. One thing I will say about stencils is please clean them very shortly after use, because you can ruin a stencil by not cleaning it. So just please, for the stencil, clean it. Number 8 is stamping. Now, if you've seen my process videos, you know I am more of a stenciler than a stamper. I do like a bit of stamping, and I'm doing it more and more now that I have more stamps like Siren. What was I saying? Yes, more stamps like this, like backgroundy ones like that. Now, I'm not going to talk about all the different kinds of stamps you can get. Obviously, you've got like acrylic ones, wood-mounted ones, all that kind of thing. Everyone has their own personal preference on these matters. But yes, you can do all sorts of things with stamps. Create any kind of image you could possibly think of if you've got the stamp for that. What I will talk about, however, when it comes to mixed media and stamping is the kind of ink you use for stamping. I suggest buying both of these kinds, but if you're going to choose between them, if you only want to spend money on one, then get this one. So this is the Memento ink, and this is the Stays On ink. They are both by the Japanese brand, the name of which I probably can't pronounce, and I'm not going to try. But the difference between these two is basically this one is water-based and this one is alcohol-based. And the reason I suggest this one over the other one is because the alcohol-based ink is not going to react with anything water-based that you put underneath, on top of, beside, whatever. Most things you use, as I said, in mixed media are going to be water-based. Like the pastes and all your inks and stuff as I said, water-based, and they're not. So when you say you sprayed a load of ink on top of a stamped image, if it's stamped with the stays on and you spray a water-based ink over it, it's not going to react. Your stamped image is going to stay the same. But of course, some things are alcohol-based, such as, well, they're not really relative to mixed media, but like Copic or Copic markers or alcohol inks and stuff. But yes, for that, you're going to want your water-based ink because it will do vice versa. The water-based is not going to react with the alcohol-based stuff. But if, for example, you stamped something with this and then sprayed some iridescent ink over the top that was water-based, this is just going to go melt into a puddle of black, really. Both of these come in lots and lots of different colours, but I would definitely suggest starting with black because it's the most useful colour. And a little bonus tip on the inks is to get yourself an embossing ink if you don't have embossing things already. Now I realise I'm probably making some mixed media people twitch by talking about embossing and mixed media because sometimes it's very much seen as a card maker's thing. But you can make some really, really beautiful images and effects and stuff by doing a bit of embossing and then doing watercolouring or inking over the top of it because it kind of acts as a watercolour or paint resist. By that same brand that I can't pronounce, this is the Versamark Watermark, I think it's called, ink, which I use as the embossing ink, and it's definitely my favourite to use. So, and you can also get embossing pens as well, so if you wanted to write something and then emboss that with a clear embossing powder and then paint over the top, that would look super cool. But for the pen embossing ones, I prefer Ranger over the other brand because, I don't know, they're just better for some reason. Number 9 is the one I've been dreading because for 9 I'm including all of the colour things. So paints and inks and, okay, paints and inks is basically it, but there's lots of different types of those things. And I really don't know what would be best to suggest as the first thing you get. Some of you, I'm sure, already have a load of watercolours and acrylics and stuff, so that would be great if you've already got them. You already know what you prefer and stuff. If you haven't got anything, I just don't know what to tell you because they each have their own benefits, their own drawbacks, personal preference and all that kind of thing. So when I talk about them now, it's in no particular order, it's just as I grab them. So first is your watercolours. If you're brand spanking new to watercolouring, I would suggest picking up one of these. This is from Hobbycraft. It cost me about £5. And if you're elsewhere in the world, you know, whatever your Hobbycraft equivalent is, Hobby Lobby or, you know, whatever, they've usually got things like this. I wouldn't get the children's ones personally because they're really, really chalky and they make me personally. But the ones that you'll find in the cheap art section, like student quality, are better. So get these to get you started on watercolour. You can also get watercolour tubes, which also I find really, really useful. And sometimes you can get slightly different effects with the watercolour tubes because depending on how much water you add to the amount of paint you squeeze out and stuff, just one of those things you got to play around with. Then if you decide you really like watercolouring, then ditch this. I know that sounds awful, but quite frankly, once you've got a set like this, this is the Kuretake Gansai Tanbi, probably said that wrong, watercolour 36 pan set. There's also like the Prima watercolours and the Jane Davenport watercolours. And I could go on, but the higher end watercolours as well. Once you've sort of started on those, you're not going to look back kind of thing. Since I've got this, I haven't opened this at all, to be honest. They are amazing. But I wouldn't jump into these ones. Definitely start out with something like this just to kind of get you going and all that kind of thing. Then you've got your acrylic paints, and just like watercolour, there's so many different levels of quality and whatnot. Start with something like these. These are Hobbycraft's own, although I do believe they've changed the packaging on these. So if you're looking out for this, I don't think they make them like this anymore. But they're only about £2 a thing. And that's actually, these are actually fairly good. You can get much, much cheaper acrylics, which is still not as good. But you always want to start out with student quality stuff before you start paying out for the artist quality stuff, because you want to know if you like using it or not. I know this is the watercolour tube, but you can also get sets of acrylics in little tubes like this if you want to try them out, if you haven't used them before. There's some Deco art here, which I think is absolutely amazing stuff. The shine on this metallic gold is ridiculous. Then you've got things like Winsor & Newton, just so many different levels and stuff. Just start off cheap and work your way up as you learn more things and more techniques and that. This is a paint that isn't mentioned much in mixed media videos, and I think it's a fab paint. If you find watercolours too delicate and watery, and if you find acrylics a bit too thick and hard to work with, then I would definitely suggest trying out some gouache or gouache paint. It's kind of, in its absolute basic form, it is somewhere between the two. It's watercolory and it's acrylic-y. It's kind of, yeah, it's between the two. I think it's a great little paint, and you can pick it up quite cheap. It's just that not as many people know about it for some reason. I'm sure you've heard of it, but yes, it's a great little paint to try. I bought my first set from the works of these ones for about £3 for 12, so great price. Next on the colouring things section of number 9 is inks, which are my personal favourite things to colour with in mixed media. But the thing with inks, again, there are so many different types, and it's very much down to personal preference or what you're using it for. As I said earlier, the majority of inks are water-based. You can get alcohol-based ones, but the ones that are slightly easier to find and get hold of and stuff are generally the water-based ones. So you can just see my inks. Let me just move you. Those are my inks there. I do have quite a few. You do not need to jump in and buy all of the inks at once. I have gathered these over some time. So I've just grabbed a couple off my shelf just to give you an idea of the kind of inks that I personally use and can personally recommend. The first, and the one I have the most colours of, you can see them all at the front there, is the Heidi Swap Colour Shine. I think it's a fabulous, fabulous ink. They come in quite a lot of colours. All of the Heidi Swap Colour Shine, also known as the nickname Heidi Shine, thanks to Adele of Inky Quill, they're all slightly, what's the word? Shimmery is the word I was looking for there. Have to shake them up. And they should, I've got a problem with this one. There's a little ball in there that you should hear when you shake it, which helps everything mix up. But for some reason in my mint, the ball keeps getting stuck. Oh, there it is. There you go. Similar, but very, very special to the Heidi Shine is the Lindy's Starburst sprays. Now, these are marvellous little things. This colour is called Tibetan Poppy Shine, and basically they are two-tone sprays. So if I spray this onto my project or whatever, I'm going to kind of get two colours going on that are mixing together. It's really, really shimmery. It's more shimmery than the Heidi Swap, and it is a fabulous, fabulous spray. Now, these actually come just as the powder, and you have to add the water yourself, so there's no risk of leaking in transit kind of thing. So I would highly recommend these. Then you've got some of the Ranger sprays. You've got the Dilutions by Diane Reevely and the Distress Spray Stains by Tim Holtz. I prefer the Dilutions because I think they are stronger, they're more pigmented, and I just think they're slightly better. The Distress are great, don't get me wrong, I think this is a fab spray. I just prefer the Dilutions over the Distress. And while we're on the subject of Distress, there are also obviously the Distress ink pads and Distress oxides, which I have yet to get into because, you know, well, they ain't cheap, but it's something I'm looking into getting into, and I know it's probably shocking everyone going, how can you possibly know about mixed media if you don't use Distress inks? What's wrong with you? But I like my liquid inks, basically. I just prefer them. It's what I prefer to use. I'm sure I will start using the ink pads eventually, but for now, I like these. And all of these, as I've mentioned, are water reactive as well, so it's quite a common little technique to do with these and these, is to just like drip bits of water on them and have different things happen, and it's just, you need to experiment yourself rather than have me telling you. There's also the sort of make your own inks, and I say sort of make your own because you're not actually making them from scratch. The first is this type, and I've actually picked up the wrong colour, but you'll get the idea. So I bought this Acaldo drawing ink from the works for very, very cheap. Unfortunately, they seem to have stopped doing it, and I'm constantly on the search to find some more colours and stuff. But I just put this in a spray bottle, which you can see was a beauty one from Superdrug, and just mixed it about, I think my ratio was about 60-40, maybe 70-30 ink to water, because on their own they're very pigmented, like too pigmented, and when they dry they're more sticky than anything else, so adding the water helps. So that is one thing you can do, which is slightly cheaper. And I used, you can see how much I used, obviously this is a different colour, but I did them at the same time, and I've had this for ages and ages, so you can only imagine how long this is going to last. It's probably going to go off before I can use it all. And then you also have little mica powders like this. These are the Cosmic Shimmer ones, but you can get many, many other different brands and stuff. And basically you take a little bit of this powder, put it in a spray bottle and shake it up, and you can make as much or as little as you want, which can be really handy. Like, I made this for a project and it's kind of like this burnt orange kind of colour, which I'm not going to want to use loads of because it's not a colour I really go for, despite it being, you know, like the colour of my head. So, you know, I don't want to spend out on a Dilutions or something in a colour I'm only going to use a little bit of for. So mica powders are great for that. There are so many different types of things. There's also things like the Lindy's Magicals and Magical Shakers, which are just there, and they're the same as Brusho powders. You put a bit of the powder on your project, you add water, and it becomes this beautiful, it's basically the same thing as spray, just in 2 different steps. And then when you mix colours as well, it looks beautiful. You've got things like gelatos, distress crayons. I could go on and on and on. What I suggest is, if you are lucky enough to have like a friend or colleague or something like that who's into mixed media, see if you can ask if you can just try out some of their stuff, so you can get an idea of what kind of stuff that you like to use. If you don't have anyone like that, then what I would do is either try and go to an event where you can have an opportunity to try out these things, or just start off slowly kind of thing. So don't buy all the colours at once. I mean, when I bought Heidi Swap Colour Shine, the first colour I got was gold, because that was what everyone was using at the time. And then with all my inks, I've always started by getting my favourite colour. So I've always started with a tealy blue colour and then gone from there. So I know I'm going to use that colour whether I like the ink or not, kind of thing. So start off buying your favourites and go from there. Just don't spend hundreds and hundreds at once. Go slow, figure out what you like to use, your preferences and all that kind of thing. Number 10. This video is going to end up way longer than I intended, but I will, let's just carry on. So number 10 is bits and pieces. And I know that's going to sound weird, but what I mean by that is start gathering things that are going to be useful in mixed media. So metal embellishments, paper flowers, just all those little bits and pieces that are going to be useful for adding layers and texture and dimension and all those wonderful things. I have, for example, some of my little metal embellishments here that I bought off eBay. I will link those if you're interested. I've got a big old pot of shells because I'm obsessed with nautical things and knew I would use them. I have in here one of my random baskets of stuff where I have like these little wooden plaque things, and I picked these up in the works. Just all this kind of stuff is useful for mixed media things. I've got, what's that, like these little metal things, just loads of stuff like that. Just start gathering it. You don't have to go out and buy it all at once. And it's also stuff you might just find lying around at home. You don't even know to go and picking up. In here I've just got another thing of random bits and pieces, like a random chain thing there, some materials, ribbons, bits of burlap, bits of cloth, bits of cross stitch cloth stuff, whatever that's called, a random shiny bit of a doily, you know, just loads of random stuff like that. And flowers as well, as I said, paper flowers, very, very helpful. As I keep saying, just start gathering things. A lot of those things I showed you just then are things that I already had when I was into like just paper crafting, you know, things like I would always be like, what do I do with this wooden thing, and what do I do with this, things like that. You often, they come in kits and stuff, and the stuff that you went, what do I do with this, I don't like it, that's now going to be helpful in mixed media. I'm just going to include as well in this little bits and pieces section, there are loads of other things like proper mixed media items like the glass glitter and the micro beads and art stones and all that kind of thing, and they are all incredible. They all have great uses and stuff, but I don't think it's necessary to include them on a basics video kind of thing. So that's why there are so many things out there like that, but again, just not necessary at this stage. Alright, number 11, and the final thing is the miscellaneous one, where I couldn't think of other categories to put these things into, and I'm just kind of cheating by calling them number 11. First thing of number 11 is some baby wipes. Now I'm sure most crafters have these lying around anyway. They are super useful just for wiping up your work surface, clearing off stamps, all that kind of thing. But yes, baby wipes, just handy to have around. I also use surface wipes, like antibacterial ones, because I have delicious pineapple smelling ones. If you are in the UK, here's this random thing I have discovered. Sainsbury's baby wipes are more moist than Tesco's baby wipes. The Sainsbury's ones are better for clearing up your work surface because they get nice and wet, whereas the Tesco ones are really good for getting rid of stains and stuff. So if you've used Stays-On ink on your stamps, Stays-On is famous for being almost impossible to get off of stamps other than using the proper Stays-On cleaner. Tesco baby wipe. Tesco baby wipe. You got to use it pretty soon afterwards, so if you've left it for a while, it's not going to clean it off. Also, if you get like gel medium on your arm or some sort of anything like, sorry, that was something dropping, anything like that, Tesco baby wipe. I mean, it does make me worry a little bit that this is being used on babies' butts, because those are sensitive little places, but you know, for this kind of purpose, Tesco for that, Sainsbury's for cleaning up your work surface. Now this is a craft mat, and I wasn't going to include this because I don't think it's an absolute necessity. It's more of a luxury kind of thing. And by luxury, I don't mean it's expensive, but this is a craft mat, and I will put this down when I am doing mixed media because it is a surface that you can easily wipe stuff off of. And you can also say I was mixing some colour in with some modelling paste. I would just do it on here. I wouldn't bother getting out a palette or anything. You can just do it on there, use it up, and then wipe it off. It's a great, great thing. Now, Ranger do one of these, which at the moment on Amazon is about £12, and sure, they're great, don't get me wrong, but this is a Teflon craft mat, but it's also a baking sheet, and you can pick up 3 of these for $4.99, and as far as I know, it works just as well as like the official mixed media mats. So I will link these below because I think these are fab. I included them because someone asked about it in a comment recently, so I thought it would be helpful. Well, in the miscellaneous section is another thing that I'm sure you have lying around, but is some kitchen roll just to help wipe up any spills. You can get cool effects if you roll it over your project when there's fresh ink on it, or if you just need, if you're like, there's too much ink on this surface or too much watercolour paint, you just mop it up with a bit of this. So yes, kitchen roll, always need it lying around. And the final thing we are finally drawing to a close, this video is so much longer than I wanted it to be, is a colour wheel. One thing about mixed media is you do need to have a good understanding of colours and how colours work together and stuff, especially if you want to avoid making mud when you've mixed too many colours or the wrong colours together. I'm not going to start explaining how a colour wheel works because this video is quite long enough. You can find quite a lot of videos and blog posts about it. Basically, you can spin it around to work out how colours work together and stuff. There's tertiary, complementary, primary, all that kind of thing. It works on the other side as well for different purposes as well. It comes with all the info on it. I picked this up for about £1 off Amazon, so I will link it. It's just, I have it lying around for when I'm in mid-project. I'm like, is that colour gonna go with that colour? Look at my colour wheel. No, it's not. So yeah, just a handy thing to have lying around. I would recommend it. And that, my friends, is finally it. I apologise for how long this video ended up. You know what I'm like? I end up rambling when I start doing these things. I can't help it. I can't make short videos. But yes, as I said at the beginning of this video, I will link almost everything down in the description box. There will be some things I can't link because I've picked them up from Poundland or they're not available anymore, but I will try my best to have as many links as possible for you. And as I also said, I've definitely left things out because I wanted to keep this as basic as possible. There is a whole big wide world of mixed media out there, and it's kind of never ending. So yes, I hope this has helped you at least just delve in, dip your toe in, get started. Please feel free to ask any questions at all that you might have, and I will do my best to answer them. And other than that, yeah, I think we're done. So apologies again that this was much longer than intended, but there we go. Please leave me a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. It really helps out my channel, and I'm sure you've had a lot of YouTubers saying this recently, but the YouTube algorithm has gone all wonky recently. I'm just playing with my spoon, and a lot of our view counts are going down and stuff, so it does really, really help me out, and I would truly appreciate it. If you have any other requests of videos you would like to see, feel free to leave them in the comments. I can't promise I'll make them all, but I promise I will consider them all. Okay, we are finally done. Thank you again so much for watching, and I wish you all the best with your mixed media journey. Okay, time to go.